now go on to the third section, which is just going to be explaining a bit on what GANS is. It's a new state of matter, a molecule of a gas, which becomes nano of itself and appears as solid state of matter. Gas to nano of solid is to be called GANS for short. We'll just explain a bit more about that. So we start out with the matter state, we create the nano, and we'll be showing you later workshops how you'll be creating your GANS material using different metal plates, one nano, one non-nano, to create your GANS material. So if we expose, a short example here, if we expose this nano copper and plain copper to another condition, like a saltwater environment, we create the condition for the GANS of copper to be created. These GANSes become free and are not attached to the copper anymore. And they become a GANS material being copper oxide. So now these are, you're looking at a picture of the jar, there's billions of tiny little particles, and those that have made their GANS already. Each one of those tiny little GANSes is now independent, and it's not attached to anything anymore, and they're essentially independent of themselves. And if you can view every single one of these little balls is like a little sun, and is radiating energy continuously outward and receiving energy coming in. And if you view these little GANS as tiny little magnets, as we showed in the beginning video, as a round three-dimensional, that's essentially what each one of those little GANS plasmas that we make. The single GANS, magnetical, has both magnetical and gravitational fields, because the fields are flowing out and the fields are coming back in. And each one of these is made of millions and millions of fields that come together and spin continuously, creating a dynamic field interaction. So that's what our little GANSes are that we make in our bottles. And each one is radiating continuously. So in the future workshops, we will be showing you, how to make your CO2, your copper, your zinc, and CH3, which is your four main ones. In how you collect your amino acids. In the health sections, we will be showing you creating the food GANS, to make calcium GANS, GANS of pills. So you'll see how we will show you that understanding the basic concept, you can begin to learn and do all this yourself on your kitchen table or in your garage. You'll be able to create all this material for yourself, and then you'll be able to use it in various ways for health and for agriculture and for energy. So the summary of what the GANS is if we view them as tiny little suns, so tiny little round magnet that's constantly radiating, and because it's free, it's a tiny little entity all on its own, it's emitting a much stronger field than what it was being attached to the matter state, and is continuously giving and receiving fields. So that was a short one, but it was important to just establish the very basics of what the GANS is. And then we can open if there's any question.
Okay, looking at all of the boards again here. I do have one from last time I kind of missed. This is Mario from the Facebook feed. Did ask, how powerful is nano on the surfaces of the material, as well as physical resistance?
Well, the nano layers that one creates on your copper is, that's the two terms, it's highly conductive and, somebody can help me, insulating material.
Yeah, insulating or resistive.
Yeah. Now that's why if anybody's brave enough to, once you've made your mag-rav and you connect it to the power grid, one can touch it without getting shocked, because those tiny nano layers insulate you. So they're insulating as well as highly conductive. It just depends on the direction of flow.
I have a question concerning the GANS.
Go ahead.
This is Boniface again. What is the difference between what they call the dry GANS and the GANS that would typically find in the liquid?
It will have different uses. In its dry form, I don't know if anybody else can help me on that one, but you just find sometimes it's used for different uses, because what's in the liquid has a certain strength, and when you dry it, you're changing that condition around it, so it'll have a different, slightly different field strength. Is anybody else, some of the students, that might be able to help? I know myself, when I had, by mistake, I was working and creating some of the capacitors, and I then touched, using my finger, and I touched my lip with the GANS material, and it was so highly energetic that made my whole tongue numb for quite some time afterwards. So it's not something to play around with lightly. It's very energetic. That's why we always stress to work with gloves and be very careful when you're working with the GANS material.
Brett, you had your hand up there. Hello, Brett. Do you have a question?
No, not a question, but in answer to Jim's question, were the differences between a dried and a non-dried. One you've dictated to, and the other you have not. And just so that everybody's aware, do never, ever, ever drink dried GANS. Whether it's in a glass or it's settled to the bottom or whatever, never drink it. I found that out the hard way. So one you've dictated to, one is still in a different state. So dictation means that you change the fields into to a different level. So it's very, very important that everybody understands that you never, ever, ever drink or have anything to do with anything that's dried in the way of drinking.
Thanks, Brett. I think, Flint, I'll move on to do a summary, and then we'll then open again for, see if there's any questions. So
yes, go ahead.
So essentially, when we look at the summary for today, the whole purpose of these workshops is to keep it short, to the point, so that you can take home certain bits of information and really understand what it's all about. So the plasma science is really an extension of what we know. It's looking deeper into the essence of everything, which is the magnetic fields. And that's what you really need to understand, is that everything is made up of these fields. So even the pen you're holding or the table you're sitting at, it's all made up of fields. And we'll go into more details next time. But that's what you really need to take home. And it's the interaction of these magnetic fields creating what we call maggrav fields, which is magnetical and gravitational fields. So it's just a slight different concept from what we've understood as attraction and repulsion, but it's really magnetical and gravitational. We create nanolayers, which allows for greater interaction with these fields that are around us, and how we can use them as filters so that we can only work with certain fields. And from those, we can start creating and producing our different GANS materials. And at the GANS, if you had to view the GANS as tiny little suns that are constantly giving and receiving fields. And it's this application and use of these GANS materials in, they say, the health and agriculture, and you'll see how it all starts fitting together under the different portions of science. And science today has really tried to compartmentalize everything. But when you start to understand the plasma, you will see that when you understand it from a health aspect, it's exactly the same in nature. It's exactly the same as the way the Earth works. It's exactly the same as the way our solar system would work, the galaxies or the universe. It's just a scale that would vary, but essentially it's all operating on the same basic principles. And that's very important for people to understand, is that the science merges everything into one basic understanding. It doesn't matter from the atom scale all the way up to the universe. It's exactly the same. All right, so those are essentially the basic points that one needs to take home from this first workshop, because they are fundamental to understanding everything later on. So if there's any questions on any of those three topics, then.
I would like to ask a question about Brett's dry GANS. Erik from Denmark. Brett said that we should never drink dry GANS. Is it dry GANS that is put in water again that you should not drink? Because I think it's very hard to drink the powder.
Yeah, no. What I meant, I'm very, very sorry, is you never put dry GANS into water and then drink the water.
Okay.
So thank you for clarifying that, because it took me a little while to get in because I put my hand up. So, but thank you for clarifying that. I really appreciate that. And you never, ever, ever drink the water of dried GANS, because there's still particles in it, and those particles are too strong. And as I said, I found out the hard way, and then Mr. Kesh warned me that you are actually physically drinking GANS, because those particles, unless they go through a what are those things that spin around?
Centrifuge.
Centrifuge. You can never drink any water that's had dried GANS in it unless it goes through a centrifuge to remove the particles, because they're too strong for us. And as I said, I did find that out the hard way, and it really did affect me quite badly. So I really, really implore everybody to never ever drink the water of a dried GANS.
Thank you, Brett. But I wonder what is actually happening, because do the particles themselves change if we have the liquid plasma from the beginning with the GANS particles, when we dry the GANS, does this mean that the GANS particles stick together into a group of particles, and this group of particles, if we dissolve in water again, it will not get dissolved, so we get bigger lumps of GANS into the body, and that is why it's too strong for us, or how is it?
That's my understanding. Is what happened to me, and I'll explain this to you, is that I did what I said that I don't recommend to do, and I found that I felt sick. The fields were so strong as it moved through my body that I literally felt ill because the fields were so strong. So there's particles caught in the water that is too strong. When it's in we call it, I don't know whether we call it a matter state or whatever, when it's still in its standard GANS state, and then we drink the water, it's fine. But if you do dry it, there are still so many particles in the water that are so strong that when you ingest it, it really does make you feel ill, I promise.
I take your word for it.
Don't try it, trust me. Don't try it. It's not
Okay,
very
well,
nice.
we're getting into something here that we haven't even discussed how to make the GANS and GANS water and so on yet. So this is a question that shouldn't even come up right now. The main thing is people are told, do not drink the GANS is the main thing. And if that includes, if you can't mix it so that it can not be ingested, then that's very, very important, of course. But this is something that we haven't even discussed it in the teaching yet. So I don't know if we should be getting into the details of how not to ingest the GANS.
Yeah, thanks, Rick.
Yeah, I can add that as when you have the original GANSes produced in the water, they are harmless to drink the water. We have to say this. It's only when you do more work on it you can get.
Well, you gotta say that in context, because is it harmless to drink the copper oxide GANS water? I don't think so. So you have to specify exactly what GANS water you mean, and in the context of when it is okay to drink it, and so on. We haven't gotten into that yet, into the teaching here. And you're telling people to start drinking GANS water, and that you've already drank GANS that's caused harm to your system and so on. So now people are wondering, what is this GANS water that causes harm? And yet we haven't even described what the GANS water is yet, or the creation of the GANSes and so on. So I think we are jumping ahead a little too fast here, and we have to let the public absorb the information we have without getting into, we have to have warnings, yes, but we haven't even described how to make it yet. So we have to wait one step at a time, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Any questions relating to today's topics?
Jim, this is Boniface again.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you for putting together this presentation. I can see how helpful it's going to be for those who've been around for a little bit, and especially for those coming in new, because I recall how I was scrambling trying to figure out how this whole thing was about when I first came to the knowledge. So I really appreciate you doing this, and I'm looking forward to what's coming ahead. Thank you.
That's a pleasure. It is important because we all know there is so much information out there, and myself, it's taken a long, long time, 2 years of study to try and get a handle on all of it. So if we can make it easier for future people coming along, then all the better. And that's what these basic workshops, are all about, is just to lay a good foundation for people so that when they do start watching other YouTube videos and that, then at least they have some understanding of the terminology and what has been spoken about. So, any other questions? Yeah.
This is Peter again. And I too want to thank you and appreciate getting back to the basics and having this step-by-step. And my question has to do with, will this be available on YouTube for review before next week? And also had some other people that I wanted to share it with that are actually working at this time. So I just had that question in regards to, will this be available?
Yes.
Yes, it will. Yes. It'll be available on YouTube, Facebook, and our live stream channels. So, yes.
Lots of choices. Thank you so much.
We have, yes, thank you, Peter. A question here from Mrs. Mario Gabriel on Facebook, asking how powerful is nano on the surface of a metal piece, as well as physical resistance?
If we look at physical resistance, the nano layers are really, really delicate, especially when you make them in the beginning. You can, if you're not very careful, you just crush those layers. One has to really let them dry for a good 3-6 months, and then they become a really, really hard, sort of almost diamond structure, diamond hardness. So it's to create really beautiful nano layers, it takes a lot of time. It's not something that we can rush and make in a weekend.
And it's also good to note that plasma, the nano layer causes unidirectional, the nano layer causes unidirection of the plasma flowing through it. Either if it's flowing with the plate or alongside the metal, becomes a superconductor, and if it's at a perpendicular to that, it becomes a super resistor.
Yeah. So that's why it becomes so important when we'll explain when you make your nano layers why attention to detail is important, so that you can get it right, so that you.
Jim, this is Dimitri. May I ask a question about GANS filtration?
Is it relating to the topic?
I believe, well, it's about filtering.
Filtering of the GANS?
Yes.
Let's leave that for later on when we get to that. Thanks.